The spotlight pierced through the darkness of Carnegie Hall like a blade of pure white light. 2,800 people sat in absolute silence, their collective breath held in anticipation. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, thick and electric, as if the very atoms in the room understood the magnitude of what was about to unfold. At the center of that spotlight sat a young woman, 21 years old. Her dark skin glowed under the stage lights, her natural hair pulled back into an elegant bun. Her eyes, though open, saw nothing. They hadn't seen anything for 12 years. But her hands, those remarkable hands, rested gently on the keys of a Steinway Model D grand piano, worth nearly $2 million waiting. In the front row, fifth seat from the center aisle, sat Harrison Caldwell, three-time Grammy winner. Living legend. The maestro, they called him. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his custom Italian suit perfectly pressed. His arms were crossed over his chest, his jaw set in a hard line. Skepticism radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on the young woman at the piano, with an expression that said louder than words, "Prove it." The young woman's name was Amara Williams, and she was about to change everything. Her fingers touched the first key. A single note rang out clear and pure, filling every corner of that legendary hall. The sound seemed to hang in the air, suspended before slowly fading into silence once more. But before the second note could follow, before the story could continue, we must go back. We must understand how this moment came to be. How a blind girl from Brooklyn ended up on the most famous stage in classical music, about to perform for the man who had publicly declared that people like her had no place in the world of serious art. This story began 6 months earlier, and it began with humiliation. 6 months before Carnegie Hall, Amara Williams lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. The neighborhood was loud, vibrant, full of life. Car horns, children playing music drifting from open windows, the rumble of the subway beneath the streets. For most people, it was noise. For Amara, it was a symphony. She had been blind since she was 9 years old. The diagnosis came with a name that sounded more like a curse than a medical condition: Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, a rare genetic disorder that destroys the optic nerve. There's no cure, no treatment. One day, young Amara could see. The next day, the world began to dim. Within 3 months, it was gone completely. The darkness came, and it never left. But Amara had discovered something in that darkness, something that most sighted people never truly find. She discovered that music wasn't something you saw on a page or watched your fingers perform. Music was something you felt, something that lived in the space between silence and sound, in the moment before a note is born and the moment after it dies. Her mother, Grace Williams, worked double shifts as a nurse at Kings County Hospital, a single mother who had raised Amara alone after her father died when Amara was just 4 years old. Grace couldn't afford piano lessons, couldn't afford a real piano. But she found a beaten-up keyboard at a thrift store for $35, and she brought it home like it was made of gold. Baby Grace had said, placing Amara's small hands on the plastic keys, "You may not see the world anymore, but you can still speak to it. You can still tell it who you are." And Amara did. She taught herself. Hour after hour, day after day, year after year. Her fingers learned to hear. Her ears learned to see. By the time she was 15, She could play pieces that professional pianists spent decades mastering. By 18, she had perfect pitch. She could hear a song once and reproduce it flawlessly. But more than that, she could transform it, make it her own, pour into it emotions that came from a place deeper than technique or training. She applied to music schools: Berkeley, Juilliard, Curtis. The rejection letters came back one after another, each with the same polite language. While we appreciate your application, we feel that your unique circumstances might make our program challenging. Unique circumstances. That's what they called her blindness, as if it were a circumstance, as if it were something temporary. But Amara didn't give up. She couldn't. Music was the only language she had that the world couldn't take away from her. It was her voice, her vision, her way of proving that she existed, that she mattered, that she was more than the darkness that surrounded her. 3 weeks before everything changed, Amara sat at the keyboard in her bedroom. The same keyboard from the thrift store, now held together with duct tape and prayers. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. Her mother stood in the doorway, watching tears streaming down her face, as they always did when Amara played. "You're going to show them," Grace whispered. "One day you're going to show all of them." Amara smiled, though she kept playing. "Maybe Mama. Maybe." She had no idea how soon that day would come, or how painful the journey would be. While Amara played in her cramped bedroom in Brooklyn, Harrison Caldwell sat in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The apartment was worth $18 million, floor-to-ceiling windows, a Bösendorfer Imperial Grand Piano, one of only a few hundred in the world. Original artwork on the walls, Picasso's and Monet's investments, as much as decorations. Harrison was 52 years old, though he looked 10 years younger. He maintained his appearance with the same perfectionism he applied to his music. Personal trainer, nutritionist, dermatologist. Everything in his life was controlled, optimized, perfected. He had been playing piano since he was 3. Child prodigy. By 7, he was performing at Lincoln Center. By 15, he had recorded his first album. By 25, he had won his first Grammy. Now, at 52, he was considered one of the greatest living pianists in the world, the maestro, a living legend. But Harrison Caldwell was not beloved for his warmth or his generosity. He was respected, admired, even feared, but not loved. He had built his reputation not just on his extraordinary talent, but on his uncompromising standards. He believed that true artistry required perfect conditions, perfect training, perfect instruments, perfect vision, perfect hearing, perfect hands. In interviews, he was famous for his harsh statements. "Mediocrity is a disease," he once told Rolling Stone. And we've become far too comfortable with it in modern classical music. We celebrate participation rather than excellence. We care more about inclusion than about art. When asked about disability accommodations in music education, he had been blunt. Piano is a visual art as much as an auditory one. You must see the keys, see your hands, see the music. Without sight, you're simply mimicking sounds you've heard. There's no true creativity, no genuine artistry. It's imitation, not innovation. These comments had sparked controversy, of course. Think pieces written debates on social media. But Harrison didn't care. Truth isn't always comfortable, he would say, but it's still truth. He had just been invited to serve as a judge for the Carnegie Hall Young Artists Competition, one of the most prestigious competitions for musicians under 25. Only 5 finalists would perform on that legendary stage. The winner would receive a $50,000 prize and a recording contract with Deutsche Grammophon, one of the world's premier classical music labels. Harrison accepted the invitation immediately. It was his duty, he felt, to ensure that only the truly deserving, the truly excellent, would have the honor of performing at Carnegie Hall. He had no idea that in 3 months, he would be sitting in that audience watching a blind girl play his own composition better than he ever had, and that it would shatter everything he thought he knew about music, about art, and about himself. The rejection letter from Berklee College of Music arrived on a Tuesday morning in January. Grace brought it in from the mailbox, her hands trembling slightly as she recognized the return address. She stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope, debating whether to hide it, to throw it away, to spare her daughter the pain. But Amara heard the paper rustling. She heard her mother's breathing the way it caught in her throat. "It came, didn't it?" Amara said from her bedroom. Grace closed her eyes. "Yes, baby. It came. Can you read it to me?" Grace opened the envelope, slowly unfolded the letter. She read it aloud, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Dear Ms. Williams, thank you for your application to Berklee College of Music. We received a record number of applications this year. While we were impressed by your dedication and passion for music, we regret to inform you that we are unable to offer you admission at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." The same polite rejection, the same careful language, the same message underneath, "You're not good enough." Or more accurately, "Your blindness makes you not good enough." Amara sat at her keyboard, perfectly still. She didn't cry. She had cried for the first 3 rejection letters. After that, the tears had stopped coming. Now there was just a hollow ache, a heaviness in her chest that wouldn't go away. Amara, Grace said softly, sitting beside her daughter. "Maybe we need to think about other options. You could teach piano. You could do session work. You could—" "I don't want to teach, Mama." Amara interrupted. "I don't want to be someone's inspirational story, the blind girl who overcame obstacles to give beginner lessons in someone's living room. I want to perform. I want to create. I want people to hear my music and feel something, not pity me, and feel proud of themselves for being so accepting." Grace took her daughter's hand. "Then what do you want to do?" Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "There's a showcase. The NYC Young Musicians Showcase. It's in 2 weeks. Anyone can perform. Music schools send scouts. Record labels send representatives. If I can perform there, if I can show them what I can really do, maybe someone will take a chance on me." Grace squeezed her hand. "Then you'll perform there. And you'll be brilliant. Because that's who you are, Amara. You're brilliant. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time." Amara smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "The problem is, Mama, most people do see. They see my blindness before they hear my music. And once they see it, they can't hear anything else." 2 weeks later, Amara performed at the NYC Young Musicians Showcase. She played Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a piece that required extraordinary technical skill and deep emotional understanding. She played it beautifully, her fingers dancing across the keys with grace and power, her body swaying with the music, her face reflecting every emotion the piece demanded. When she finished, the audience applauded. Politely. Warmly. The way you applaud when you're impressed but not moved. The way you applaud when you're thinking. That was good, considering. No scouts approached her afterward. No representatives offered contracts. A few people came up to shake her hand to tell her she was inspiring and so brave. Each compliment felt like a tiny knife. But one person had been watching from the back of the room. Someone who would remember her performance. Someone who would ensure that in 3 months, Amara Williams would find herself at a gala where the course of her entire life would change. That person was Charlotte Reed, the event coordinator for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual charity gala. And Charlotte believed in giving opportunities to those who deserved them. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Spring Gala was one of the most exclusive events in New York City's social calendar. Tickets cost $10,000 each. The guest list included billionaires, celebrities, politicians, and cultural icons. The money raised went to arts education programs for underprivileged children. It was a night where the wealthy congratulated themselves for their generosity while enjoying champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Charlotte Reed had fought to include Amara in the evening's entertainment. The committee had been skeptical. A blind pianist, one board member had said. "Isn't that a bit obvious? A bit too on the nose for a charity event." But Charlotte had insisted, and eventually they had agreed. Amara would perform one piece early in the evening before the main entertainment. Grace had borrowed money to buy Amara a dress for the occasion. Deep blue, elegant, simple. She had braided Amara's hair into an intricate pattern, her fingers working with love and care. "You're beautiful, baby," Grace whispered as she finished. "You're going to be amazing." Amara's hands were shaking as they arrived at the Met. The building was overwhelming even without sight. The echoes of voices, the click of expensive shoes on marble floors, the rustle of designer gowns, the clink of champagne glasses. It smelled like perfume and money and expectation. Charlotte met them at the entrance, warm and kind. "Amara, I'm so glad you're here. You're going to perform right after the welcome remarks. Just one piece about 8 minutes. The piano is a Steinway Model B. I had it tuned this morning specifically for you." Amara nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. This was it. This was her chance. All these influential people, all these connections, all in one room. If she could just make them listen, really listen, maybe something would change. The welcome remarks were brief. Then Charlotte introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special performance tonight. Amara Williams is a 21-year-old pianist from Brooklyn. Despite losing her sight at the age of 9, she has developed extraordinary musical talent. Please welcome Amara." The applause was polite, charitable. Amara heard it and felt her stomach twist. Despite losing her sight, those words would follow her everywhere it seemed. She made her way to the piano, her hand trailing along the edge of the stage. She sat, adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys. She took a deep breath, and she began to play. She had chosen Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata third movement. Fast, furious, technically demanding. She wanted to show them what she could do. Her fingers flew across the keys, the music filling the great hall of the museum, bouncing off the high ceilings, wrapping around the sculptures and paintings. She played with everything she had, every ounce of skill, every bit of emotion, every fragment of her soul. The music was angry and beautiful and desperate and free. It was her voice, the only voice that mattered. When she finished, the applause was louder, more genuine. Amara stood, took a bow, and made her way off stage. Her heart was pounding. She had done it. She had really done it. But then she heard a voice, male-cultured, carrying easily across the room. "That was quite impressive," the voice said, for what it was. Amara froze. Charlotte, standing beside her, stiffened. The voice continued. "Of course, one must admire the determination, the sheer effort required to memorize such a demanding piece. But let's be honest with ourselves. This is mimicry, not artistry. Piano is a visual art, as much as it is auditory. You must see the keys, see your hands, see how your body moves with the music. Without sight, one can only reproduce sounds that have been heard, patterns that have been memorized. There's no true creativity, no genuine innovation. Amara's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Everyone in the room knew that voice. Harrison Caldwell. I mean, no disrespect. Harrison continued his tone, suggesting he meant exactly that. But we do a disservice to genuine artists when we pretend that overcoming a disability is the same as achieving mastery. Letting a blind person on this stage is charity, not art. It's inclusion theater. And frankly, it diminishes the very programs we're trying to support tonight. The room was silent. Utterly silent. Amara stood frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel her mother's hand suddenly gripping her arm. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then a dozen. Half the room applauded Harrison's words. The other half stood in uncomfortable silence. Charlotte's voice was shaking with anger. Mr. Caldwell, I hardly think. You don't have to think. Harrison interrupted smoothly. I'm simply stating facts. Uncomfortable facts, perhaps, but facts nonetheless. True artistry requires all faculties working in harmony. To suggest otherwise is to lower our standards for the sake of political correctness. Amara wanted to speak, wanted to scream, wanted to march back to that piano and play something that would prove him wrong. But her throat was closed, her eyes useless as they were burned with tears she refused to let fall. Her entire body shook. Grace's arms wrapped around her. Let's go, baby. Let's go home. They left. Quietly, while Harrison Caldwell continued to hold court, explaining his philosophy on art and excellence to the nodding heads and sympathetic murmurs of New York's elite. The video appeared online within an hour. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Harrison's words, the applause, Amara standing frozen on the side of the stage. By morning, it had 1 million views. By the end of the week, it was at 20 million. The comments were divided. Some people defended Harrison, praised his honesty, his refusal to lower standards. Others called him ableist, cruel elitist. Think pieces were written. Debates raged on social media. But Amara didn't read the comments or the articles. She couldn't read them anyway. She just sat in her bedroom in the darkness that was her constant companion and listened to the sounds of the city outside her window. And she made a decision. For 3 days, Amara didn't touch the piano. She sat in her room, barely eating, barely sleeping. The video played in her mind on an endless loop. Harrison's voice, those words, mimicry, not artistry, charity, not art. Grace was beside herself with worry and rage. He's a bitter old man, she said again and again. He's wrong, baby. You know he's wrong. But was he? That was the question that haunted Amara. Was he wrong? Or was he saying what everyone else was too polite to say? Every rejection letter, every consolation prize, every "you're so inspiring" instead of "you're so talented." Maybe they all thought the same thing. Maybe she had been fooling herself. On the 4th day, there was a knock on the door. Grace answered it to find Professor David Reynolds standing in the hallway. He was 72 years old, a retired piano teacher from Brooklyn Conservatory of Music who had been giving Amara free lessons for the past 5 years. He had wild white hair and kind eyes, and hands gnarled with arthritis that could no longer play, but could still teach. "I need to speak with Amara," he said. Grace let him in. He made his way to Amara's room and sat beside her on the bed. "I saw the video," he said quietly. Amara said nothing. Harrison Caldwell is one of the greatest technical pianists of our generation, Professor Reynolds continued. But do you know what he's not? He's not brave. He's never taken a risk in his entire life. Every piece he plays exactly as it was written, exactly as it has always been played. Perfect technique, perfect precision, perfectly boring. Amara turned her head toward his voice. He's a legend. He's a skilled craftsman, Reynolds corrected. But you, Amara, you're an artist. You take the notes on a page and you transform them into something that makes people feel. That's the difference. That's what he doesn't understand and never will. He said I'm just mimicking, just reproducing sounds. He's wrong. And I'll tell you how I know he's wrong. Because I've listened to you play for 5 years. I've heard you take pieces that I've heard 1,000 times and make them new. I've heard you find emotions in music that the composers themselves didn't know were there. That's not mimicry. That's genius. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I found out he's going to be a judge at the Carnegie Hall Young Artists Competition. Reynolds was silent. The competition is in 3 months, Amara continued. 5 finalists get to perform on that stage, in front of him, Amara. I'm going to audition, she said, her voice suddenly firm. I'm going to make it to that final, and I'm going to perform on that stage, and I'm going to make him eat every single word he said about me. Reynolds smiled, though she couldn't see it. What are you going to play? Amara's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. His own composition. Rhapsody in Darkness, the piece he wrote 10 years ago. The one everyone says is his masterpiece. The one that's so difficult that most pianists won't even attempt it. Reynolds drew in a sharp breath. Amara, that piece it's nearly impossible, even for sighted pianists with decades of experience. I know, you could choose something safer, something more traditionally beautiful. I don't want safe, Amara said. I don't want beautiful. I want to play his music back to him and show him what he's too blind to see. Professor Reynolds was quiet. Then he said, When do we start? The Carnegie Hall Young Artists Competition accepted applications from pianists under the age of 25. Thousands applied. Only 200 were invited to regional auditions. Only 50 made it to the semifinals. And only 5, the 5 best young pianists in the country, would perform in the final round at Carnegie Hall itself. The winner would receive $50,000 and a recording contract. But more than that, they would receive recognition, validation, the stamp of approval from the classical music world's most elite institution. Harrison Caldwell would be the head judge. Amara submitted her application. She listed her training, her performances, her repertoire. She didn't mention her blindness in the application. There was no box to check, no disability disclosure required. She would let her audition speak for itself. 2 weeks later, she received an email. She had been selected for the regional audition in New York City. She would have 15 minutes to perform pieces of her choosing. If she passed, she would move on to the semifinals. The audition was in 6 weeks. She had 6 weeks to master Rhapsody in Darkness. Professor Reynolds brought her a recording of Harrison performing the piece. It was 43 minutes long. Amara listened to it once, then never again. She didn't want to mimic his interpretation. She wanted to find her own. She obtained the sheet music, or rather Professor Reynolds did. He sat with her for hours reading it aloud, describing the notation, the tempo markings, the dynamic indications. Amara's fingers followed along on the keyboard, learning the shapes, the patterns, the logic of Harrison's composition. Rhapsody in Darkness was Harrison's attempt to capture the experience of complete absence. Not just physical darkness, but existential darkness. The loss of hope, the weight of despair, the search for meaning in a void. He had written it during a period of deep depression following his divorce. Critics had called it his masterpiece, a rare moment where Harrison's technical perfection merged with genuine emotional depth. The irony wasn't lost on Amara. A sighted man's meditation on darkness to be performed by someone who lived in it. She practiced 8 hours a day, then 10, then 12. Her fingers developed calluses on top of calluses. Her back ached from sitting at the keyboard. Her mother worried, tried to make her rest, tried to make her eat. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Grace said. "Not hard enough," Amara replied. The piece was structured in 7 movements, each representing a different stage of descent into darkness and ultimately emergence into light. The technical demands were extraordinary. Octave runs that spanned the entire keyboard. Polyrhythmic sections where each hand played in a different time signature. Passages that required the hands to cross over each other repeatedly at high speed. For a sighted pianist, it was one of the most difficult pieces in the modern repertoire. For a blind pianist, it seemed impossible. But Amara had an advantage that Harrison didn't understand. She didn't need to see the keys. She felt them. Her fingers knew where they were in space, could judge distances and intervals by muscle memory alone. And more than that, she understood darkness in a way Harrison never could. He had written about it from the outside as an observer. She lived in it, every day, every moment. She knew its weight, its texture, its temperature. She knew what it felt like to be surrounded by absence, to lose something precious, and have to find a way to keep going. 3 weeks into her preparation, she hit a wall. Movement 4. The central crisis of the piece required a level of virtuosity that seemed beyond her reach. Her fingers couldn't move fast enough, couldn't maintain the precision while sustaining the emotion. She practiced it for 6 hours straight, trying again and again, failing again and again. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, she slammed her hands on the keys, creating a discordant crash. "I can't do it," she shouted. "It's too hard." "He wrote it to be impossible," Professor Reynolds, sitting in the corner of the room, said quietly. "Maybe that's the point." Amara turned toward his voice. What Harrison wrote this piece during the darkest time of his life. He was trying to capture impossibility. The feeling that you'll never escape, never find light, never be whole again. He wrote it to be barely playable because that's how he felt, barely able to keep going. Amara sat back on the bench, breathing hard. "But here's what he didn't understand when he wrote it," Reynolds continued. "And here's what he still doesn't understand. The piece isn't about the darkness. It's about what you do in the darkness. It's about playing anyway, even when it feels impossible. That's the real message. And you, Amara, you've been doing that your entire life." Something clicked in Amara's mind. She turned back to the piano and started movement 4 again. But this time, she didn't try to play it perfectly. She played it with the imperfection, the struggle, the barely holding on quality that Harrison had built into it. She let her fingers stumble slightly, let the rhythm waver, let the emotion break through the technique. And suddenly, it worked. It was messy and raw and real. It was exactly what the piece needed. Professor Reynolds stood up, tears in his eyes. "That's it," he whispered. "That's it, exactly." 4 weeks later, Amara walked into the regional audition at Manhattan School of Music. There were 50 pianists auditioning that day. She was number 37. She waited her turn, listening to snippets of other performances through the walls. Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff, all beautiful, all technically proficient. When her name was called, she walked to the piano, sat down, and played the first 3 movements of Rhapsody in Darkness. She had 15 minutes. She chose the most dramatic, most technically demanding sections. She poured everything into those 15 minutes. When she finished, there was silence from behind the judging panel. Then a woman's voice said, "Thank you, Ms. Williams. We'll notify you of the results within 2 weeks." Amara stood, bowed, and left. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. She had advanced to the semifinals. The semifinals were different. No longer a regional audition in a small concert hall. This was serious. Lincoln Center. A real audience. 3 judges instead of 1. And somewhere in the building, though not yet in the judging room, Harrison Caldwell was preparing for the final round. 50 pianists had made it to the semifinals. They would perform over 3 days. At the end, only 5 would advance to Carnegie Hall. Amara arrived on the second day. Her performance was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She had chosen to perform the complete Rhapsody in Darkness. All 7 movements, 43 minutes. It was a risk. Most of the other performers would play shorter pieces, multiple works by different composers to show their range. But Amara didn't want to show range. She wanted to show depth. She wanted to show mastery of the piece that Harrison himself had written. The night before her performance, Grace sat with her in their apartment. "Are you nervous?" Grace asked. "Terrified," Amara admitted. "Good," Grace said. "Fear means you care, and you should care. This matters. What if I'm not good enough, Mama? What if he was right?" Grace took her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me. When you were 9 years old and you lost your sight, do you remember what you said to me?" Amara shook her head. "You said, 'The world isn't dark, Mama. It's just different.' You were 9 years old, and you had more wisdom than most adults ever find. You didn't give up then. You're not going to give up now." Grace paused, then continued. "Your father, God rest him, he used to say that the only disability in life is a bad attitude. But I think it's more than that. I think the only real disability is letting other people define what you can and can't do. Harrison Caldwell doesn't get to define you. No one does. You define yourself. And tomorrow, you're going to show them exactly who Amara Williams is." The next day, Amara arrived at Lincoln Center 4 hours early. She wanted to practice on the actual piano she would perform on to learn its particular voice and touch. The stage manager allowed her 30 minutes. She sat at the piano alone on that vast stage, and she played through sections of the piece, learning how the sound bounced off the walls, how the acoustics changed, how the pedals responded. Every piano was different, had its own personality. This one was bright and responsive, quick to speak, but also quick to fade. She would need to adjust her technique accordingly. At 3 o'clock, the audience filed in. 400 people. The 3 judges sat in the front row, stone-faced and professional. Amara couldn't see them, but she could feel them. The weight of their judgment, the pressure of their expectations. The stage manager announced her name. Amara Williams will perform Rhapsody in Darkness by Harrison Caldwell. A murmur went through the audience. This was Harrison's piece, his signature work. The audacity of it, the boldness was not lost on anyone. Amara walked to the piano, sat down, adjusted her position. She placed her hands on the keys. She took 3 deep breaths. And she began. Movement 1 was titled Twilight. It represented the beginning of darkness, that moment when light begins to fade and fear begins to creep in. Amara played it with a delicate touch, the notes falling like drops of water, each one distinct, but part of a larger flow. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but underneath it was an undercurrent of unease, a sense that something was ending and could not be stopped. Movement 2. Descent was faster, more aggressive. The light was gone now, and the fear was real. Amara's hands flew across the keys, creating cascades of notes that tumbled over each other, dissonant and desperate. Her body swayed with the music, her face reflecting the turmoil of the piece. Movement 3. The void was the longest and slowest. It represented the depths of darkness, the place where hope goes to die. Amara played it with a heavy touch, each note weighted with sorrow. The tempo was so slow that the silence between notes became part of the music. The audience barely breathed, caught in the gravity of the piece. Movement 4. Crisis was the technical peak. This was the section Amara had struggled with for weeks. Fast, complex, demanding absolute precision while maintaining emotional intensity. Her fingers were a blur on the keys, her hands crossing and recrossing, her entire body engaged in the effort. There was no room for error here, no forgiveness in the notes. She played it with controlled chaos, with the feeling of barely holding on that Professor Reynolds had helped her find. It was messy and beautiful and terrifying. It was real. Movement 5. Searching began quietly, tentatively. This was the turning point, the moment when even in complete darkness, something begins to look for light. The melody was fragile, uncertain, like a question being asked, with no guarantee of an answer. Amara played it with tender hope, with the vulnerability of someone who has been hurt, but is willing to try again. Movement 6. Emergence was where hope began to solidify into something real. The music grew brighter, stronger, more confident. The melodies from earlier movements returned, but transformed, healed, made whole. Amara's playing became more powerful, her touch more assertive. This was the sound of survival, of refusing to be broken. And then, Movement 7. Luminescence. This was joy. Not simple happiness, but hard-earned joy, joy that knows sorrow intimately and chooses to exist anyway. The final movement was triumphant without being bombastic, beautiful without being saccharine. It acknowledged the darkness, but refused to be defined by it. Amara played the final chord, a bright sustained C major that rang out through the hall like a bell. She held it, let it resonate, let it fade naturally into silence. For 3 full seconds, the audience was quiet. Then they erupted. Standing ovation. All 400 people on their feet. Applause that was thunderous, overwhelming, genuine. Amara stood, took a bow, and made her way off stage. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. She had done it. She had actually done it. 1 week later, the results were announced. 5 names. 5 pianists who would perform at Carnegie Hall in the final competition. Amara Williams was number 4 on the list. She was going to Carnegie Hall, and Harrison Caldwell would be waiting. Making it to the finals should have been the happiest moment of Amara's life. Instead, it triggered something she hadn't expected, crippling self-doubt. The Carnegie Hall Young Artists competition was different from the semifinals. It wasn't just about musical ability anymore. It was about poise, presentation, marketability. The other 4 finalists were exactly what the classical music world expected conservatory-trained wealthy enough to have studied with the best teachers since childhood, comfortable in the spotlight. Amara researched her competition, or rather Grace did, reading the information aloud. There was Jennifer Park, 24, who had studied at Juilliard, and Curtis, who had been performing since she was 7. Christopher Liu, 23, child prodigy, who had performed with the New York Philharmonic at age 15. Sofia Martinez, 22, whose family owned a music academy in Spain, and David Kim, 23, who had won every major piano competition in Asia before moving to the United States. And then there was Amara, Brooklyn-born, self-taught until she was 15. No prestigious schools, no famous teachers, no family connections. Just her mother, her keyboard held together with duct tape, and a dream that seemed more impossible every day. The final competition was 6 weeks away. The format was simple but brutal. Each finalist would perform for 30 minutes on the Carnegie Hall stage. They could choose any repertoire they wanted, but they had to include at least one piece by a living composer. The 5 judges, with Harrison Caldwell as head judge, would score each performance on technical proficiency, artistic interpretation, and stage presence. The winner would be announced that same night. Amara decided to perform Rhapsody in Darkness again, but this time all 7 movements complete with no cuts, no abbreviations. 43 minutes of Harrison's own music played back to him by the woman he had publicly humiliated. But as the weeks passed and the competition approached, doubt crept in like a poison. She woke up at 3 in the morning, her heart racing, her mind filled with Harrison's words. Mimicry, not artistry. Charity, not art. What if he was right? What if she made it to that stage and proved him right in front of everyone? What if she failed spectacularly, confirming every prejudice, every assumption about what blind people could and couldn't do? The pressure was crushing. She practiced until her fingers bled, until her mother forced her to stop, until Professor Reynolds physically removed her from the piano bench and made her rest. "You're going to hurt yourself," Reynolds said one day, examining her hands. Her fingertips were raw, some of them cracked and bleeding. "I can't afford to hurt myself," Amara replied. "I can't afford anything less than perfect." "Perfection isn't the goal," Reynolds said firmly. "Truth is the goal. Emotion is the goal. Connection is the goal. Harrison plays perfectly." You know what that sounds like? It sounds like a very expensive music box. Beautiful, but lifeless. But the words didn't help. The doubt had taken root. It was Grace who finally broke through. 3 weeks before the competition, she came home from a double shift at the hospital to find Amara sitting in the dark, not at the piano, just sitting, her hands folded in her lap. Baby Grace said softly, sitting beside her. "Talk to me." "I'm scared," Mama Amara whispered. "I'm so scared. Of what? Of proving him right. Of being exactly what he said I was. Of being an inspirational story instead of a real artist." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Let me tell you about your father." Amara turned toward her mother's voice, surprised. Grace rarely talked about Amara's father. The grief was still too fresh, even after 17 years. "Your father was a jazz musician," Grace continued. "Saxophone. He was brilliant. Could make that instrument sing, make it cry, make it laugh. But he was black, and this was the 90s. And even though we like to think things had changed, they hadn't. Not really. He auditioned for orchestras, for ensembles, for studio work. Do you know what they told him?" Amara shook her head. They told him he was too urban, too raw, too intense, that his playing lacked refinement, which was code for, "You're black, and we don't want you here." He could have let that destroy him. He could have tried to play the way they wanted to smooth out all the rough edges to make himself acceptable. But he didn't. He said, "If they don't want the real me, then they don't deserve any of me." Grace took her daughter's hands. "He died when you were 4, but before he died, he made me promise something. He made me promise that I would teach you to be yourself, unapologetically and completely. He said the world would try to make you smaller, quieter, more palatable, and he said I shouldn't let them. Tears were streaming down Amara's face now. Harrison Caldwell doesn't want you to be yourself, Grace said. He wants you to be what he thinks you should be, which is nothing. He wants you to disappear. But you're not going to disappear. You're going to walk onto that stage and you're going to play your heart out and you're going to show him and everyone else that you are exactly who you're meant to be. Not despite your blindness, not because of your blindness, just you. Amara, an artist. Something shifted in Amara that night. The doubt didn't disappear completely, but it no longer had power over her. She returned to the piano, but this time she didn't practice with desperation. She practiced with purpose. She stopped trying to play Rhapsody in Darkness the way Harrison had written it. She started playing it the way she felt it. She added her own dynamics, her own tempo variations, her own interpretation. She took Harrison's notes and made them hers. Professor Reynolds listened to her practice one day, and when she finished, he was crying. "That's not Harrison's piece anymore," he said. "That's yours." "Is that allowed?" Amara asked. "Can I change it that much?" "Art isn't about permission," Reynolds replied. "It's about truth. And what you just played is true. More true than anything Harrison ever played. 2 weeks before the competition, Amara had a breakthrough moment that changed everything. She was practicing Movement 4, the crisis section, and she was struggling with a particularly difficult passage. Her fingers kept tripping over the notes, the rhythm kept falling apart. Frustrated, she stopped, and in the silence she heard something. The sound of the city outside her window. Car horns, sirens, music from someone's radio. The rhythm of life itself chaotic and imperfect and beautiful. And she realized something. Harrison had written Rhapsody in Darkness in a soundproof studio in complete silence, trying to imagine what darkness felt like. But Amara lived in darkness, and her darkness was never silent. It was full of sound, full of life, full of complexity. She started playing again, but this time she didn't try to impose order on the chaos. She let the chaos be part of the music. She let her playing be imperfect, messy human. She let it breathe. And suddenly the piece came alive in a way it never had before. Professor Reynolds was right. It wasn't Harrison's piece anymore. It was hers. The final breakthrough came 11 days before the competition. Amara was practicing late at night, the city quiet around her, just her and the piano and the music. She was working through Movement 7 Luminescence, the triumphant final section. Harrison had written it as a celebration, a victory over darkness. But as Amara played it, she realized something felt wrong. Not technically wrong, emotionally wrong. The movement was too simple, too easy. It suggested that emergence from darkness was straightforward, that once you found the light, everything was okay. But that wasn't true. That wasn't her experience. Darkness didn't just end. It came and went. Some days were better than others. Some days you felt strong. Some days you felt lost all over again. Emergence wasn't a destination. It was a journey that never quite finished. She stopped playing and sat in the silence thinking. Then she did something that felt almost blasphemous. She changed Harrison's composition. She added a section in the middle of Movement 7, where the music suddenly darkened again, where the doubt crept back in, where the shadows returned. But then instead of fighting it, instead of trying to banish it completely, the music learned to coexist with it. The light and the dark, played together, harmonized, became two parts of the same whole. It was risky. Harrison had composed this piece. Changing it was audacious, possibly offensive. but it felt right. It felt true. She played through the new version, and when she finished, she heard her mother's voice from the doorway. "How long have you been standing there, Mama?" Amara asked. "Long enough," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "Amara, I don't have words for what that was. I changed his composition. I probably shouldn't have." "No," Grace said firmly, walking over and sitting beside her daughter. "You didn't change it. You completed it. You made it whole. Because Harrison wrote about darkness from the outside, but you know it from the inside. He was always trying to escape it. You're teaching people how to live with it." Amara felt tears on her cheeks. What if the judges hate it? What if they think I'm disrespectful? "Then they're fools," Grace said. "But they won't. Because what you just played is the truth. And truth always recognizes truth." Over the next week, Amara refined the changes working with Professor Reynolds to make sure they flowed naturally, to make sure the new section didn't feel jarring or out of place. Reynolds was initially hesitant, worried about the reaction, but as he heard what Amara had created, his concerns melted away. "You know," he said one afternoon, "I taught piano for 45 years. I worked with hundreds of students. Some were technically brilliant. Some had perfect pitch. Some could memorize a concerto in a week. But I've only worked with 3 people in my entire life who I would call true artists. People who didn't just play music, but who spoke through it. Who used the piano as a language to say things that couldn't be said any other way." He paused, then continued. "You're one of those 3, Amara. You're the real thing, and I'm honored to have been a small part of your journey." 5 days before the competition, Amara performed her complete interpretation for a small audience at Professor Reynolds' apartment. Just 15 people, friends and former students of Reynolds, people who loved music and understood its power. She played all 43 minutes. The original 6 movements and her modified 7th movement. She played with complete commitment, holding nothing back, letting every emotion she had pour through her fingers into the keys. When she finished, the silence lasted nearly 10 seconds. Then the applause began, and with it, tears. Nearly everyone in the room was crying. They stood, applauded, shouted bravos. One woman, a professional violinist, came up to Amara afterward and said, "That was one of the most profound musical experiences of my life." "Thank you." Professor Reynolds hugged her tightly. "You're ready," he whispered. "You're more than ready." But there was one more thing Amara needed to do before the competition. One more piece of preparation that had nothing to do with music. 3 days before Carnegie Hall, she sat down with her mother and said, "I need to know something. I need to know what Harrison Caldwell looks like." Grace was surprised. "Why, baby? You've never cared what anyone looks like before." "I know, but I want to picture him. When I'm playing, I want to know who I'm playing for, or maybe who I'm playing against. I need to know." So Grace described him. He's 52 years old, but he looks younger. Silver hair styled perfectly. Tall, maybe 6 feet. He dresses expensively, designer suits. Italian shoes. His face is angular, sharp features. He has blue eyes that are very cold, very assessing. He moves like someone who is completely in control, like he's choreographed every gesture. Amara listened, building a picture in her mind. Not of what Harrison looked like, but of what he was. Controlled. Perfect. Untouchable. Everything she wasn't. Good, she thought. Let him be perfect. Let him be untouchable. Because I'm about to touch him in a way he never expected. The night before the competition, Amara didn't practice. She had learned early on that the day before a major performance, you rest. You trust in the preparation you've done. You let your body and mind recover. She and Grace went to Prospect Park. They walked along the paths, listening to the sounds of the city, of children playing, of dogs barking, of life happening all around them. They got ice cream from a vendor sat on a bench and just existed together in the moment. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Grace said, "I'm proud of you. I have never been more proud of anyone or anything in my entire life." "I'm scared," Mama Amara admitted. "But I'm ready. I know you are, baby. I know you are." That night, Amara slept better than she had in months. She dreamed of music, of light and darkness dancing together, of a standing ovation that never ended. Tomorrow was Carnegie Hall. Tomorrow was Harrison Caldwell. Tomorrow was everything. 1 week before Carnegie Hall, the 5 finalists were invited to a mandatory orientation at the venue. They would each have 30 minutes to practice on the actual stage, to familiarize themselves with the piano, the acoustics, the feel of the space. Amara arrived with Professor Reynolds. The moment she walked into Carnegie Hall, she felt the weight of history. This wasn't just a building. It was a temple of music. Tchaikovsky had conducted here. Rachmaninoff had performed here. Horowitz-Rubinstein, every great pianist in history, had played on this stage. And in 5 days, Amara Williams would join them. The stage manager, a woman named Patricia with a kind voice, gave them a tour. She described the architecture, the red velvet seats, the golden acoustic panels, the 5 tiers of balconies rising up into near darkness above. "The piano is a Steinway Model D," Patricia said. "It was custom-built for Carnegie Hall in 1998. It's maintained by our master technician and tuned before every performance. You'll have 30 minutes to practice on it now." Amara walked onto the stage, her hand trailing along the edge. The space felt enormous, vast, overwhelming. She could hear the emptiness, the way sound would travel in this room. With 800 people here, the acoustics would change completely. The sound would be warmer, more immediate, less reverberant. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys. They felt perfect. Perfectly weighted, perfectly responsive. This was an instrument that cost more than most people's houses, an instrument that had been played by legends. She played a few scales, testing the touch, the responsiveness. Then she played the opening of Rhapsody in Darkness. The sound that filled the hall was breathtaking, rich and full and alive. This piano had a voice that demanded to be heard. After her 30 minutes, she left feeling both exhilarated and terrified. This was real. This was actually happening. The next few days blurred together. She practiced, but not obsessively. She rested, she ate well. She spent time with her mother walking through Brooklyn, listening to the sounds of home. 2 days before the competition, Grace took her shopping. "You need a dress," she said. "Something special." They went to a boutique in Park Slope that Grace had been saving up for. The owner, a woman named Sarah, was patient and kind. She described different dresses to Amara, let her feel the fabrics helped her choose. The dress they finally selected was deep purple, elegant and simple. It had a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that would move beautifully when she walked. "You look like a queen," Grace said, her voice choked with emotion. The night before the competition, Amara couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, but from a strange, calm energy. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city, and she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The blindness that took her sight, but gave her a different way of seeing. The rejection letters that made her stronger. The humiliation at the Met that gave her purpose. The thousands of hours of practice that brought her here. She thought about Harrison Caldwell, sitting somewhere in his penthouse, probably sleeping peacefully, confident in his judgments, secure in his superiority. She smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she would show him. Tomorrow she would show everyone. Tomorrow Amara Williams would play. The day of the Carnegie Hall Young Artists Competition Final dawned cold and clear. April 15th, a Wednesday. Amara woke at 6 in the morning, though her performance wasn't until 8 that evening. She was the last of the 5 finalists to perform. The competition started at 4 o'clock and would run for 5 hours, with each pianist performing for 30 minutes and a 15-minute break between each performance. Being last was both an advantage and a curse. Advantage: the audience would be warmed up, receptive, ready to be moved. The judges would have context, something to compare her to. Curse: the audience would also be tired. The judges might have already made up their minds. And the pressure of following 4 extraordinary performances would be immense. Grace made breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Amara could barely eat. Not from nerves, she felt strangely calm, but because her body was already in performance mode, already conserving energy for what was to come. "You need to eat, baby," Grace said gently. Amara forced down half the eggs and 1 piece of toast. "I'm okay, Mama. I just need to stay focused." Professor Reynolds arrived at noon. He had brought flowers, white roses, Amara's favorite, because of their scent. "For after," he said. "For when you've won, don't jinx it," Amara said, but she was smiling. They spent the afternoon quietly. Grace read aloud from a novel Amara loved, a biography of Beethoven. They talked about nothing important: the weather, the news, a funny thing that had happened on Grace's shift at the hospital. They avoided talking about the competition, about Harrison, about what was going to happen. At 3 o'clock, they began getting ready. Grace helped Amara into the purple dress, zipped it up, adjusted the fabric. She did Amara's hair, braiding it into an intricate crown around her head. She applied minimal makeup. Amara didn't wear much, didn't see the point, but Grace insisted on lipstick. "For the photos," she said. At 4:30, they arrived at Carnegie Hall. The finalists had been instructed to arrive 2 hours before their performance time. Amara would perform at 8 o'clock, which meant she needed to be there by 6, but Grace wanted extra time. The backstage area was controlled chaos. The first finalist, Jennifer Park, was already performing. Amara could hear the muffled sound of piano through the walls. Chopin, she thought. Ballade number 4. Christopher Liu was pacing nervously. Sophia Martinez was doing breathing exercises. David Kim sat perfectly still, eyes closed, visualizing his performance. And Amara stood near the wall, one hand touching the painted brick, centering herself. At 6:45, Professor Reynolds found her. Christopher just finished. "Sophia is about to start. You have about 90 minutes. Amara nodded. "How's the audience packed?" "Every seat filled. Standing room only. I spotted several music critics from major publications. And Harrison is in the front row center seat." Amara felt her pulse quicken. "How does he look?" "Like he's judging the world and finding it wanting," Reynolds said dryly. "But that's how he always looks. Don't think about him. Think about the music." At 7:30, Sophia finished to enthusiastic applause. David was next. Amara listened to his performance through the wall. Prokofiev, technically perfect, but emotionally cold. The applause was respectful, but not ecstatic. At 8 o'clock, it was time. Patricia, the stage manager, came to get her at 7:55. "5 minutes, Amara." "Are you ready?" "Yes," Amara said, and she meant it. Grace hugged her tightly. "I love you, baby. You're going to be magnificent." Professor Reynolds squeezed her hand. Play for yourself. Not for them. Not for the judges. For yourself. That's when the magic happens. Amara nodded. She took a deep breath, and she followed Patricia down the hallway toward the stage. As they walked, Patricia described what was happening. David just took his final bow. The applause is dying down. The judges are making notes. Harrison just said something to the judge next to him. I can't hear what. David is leaving the stage. The crew is resetting the piano bench. Okay, he's gone. Now the master of ceremonies is walking to the microphone. They reached the wings. Amara could hear everything now. The murmur of the audience, the rustle of programs, someone coughing, the MC's footsteps across the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC said, his voice amplified and clear. Our final performer this evening is Amara Williams. Miss Williams is 21 years old from Brooklyn, New York. She will be performing Rhapsody in Darkness by Harrison Caldwell. Please welcome Amara Williams. The applause was different from what had come before. It was curious, expectant, maybe a little uncertain. Word had spread about the Met Gala incident. People knew who she was. They knew what this performance meant. Patricia touched Amara's elbow. You're on. The stage is straight ahead 15 steps. The piano is 23 steps from the wing entrance. I'll walk you to the stage edge. No, Amara said firmly. Thank you, but no. I'll walk alone. Patricia hesitated. Are you sure I'm sure? Amara stepped out of the wings and onto the stage of Carnegie Hall. The applause grew louder. She could feel the lights, their heat on her skin. She could sense the vastness of the space around her, the presence of thousands of people watching her, waiting for her. She walked forward, counting steps, her hands loose at her sides. 15 steps to center stage. Then she turned faced where she knew the piano was and walked toward it. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate. She moved with confidence, with grace, with the certainty of someone who knew exactly where she was going. 23 steps. Her fingers found the piano bench. She adjusted it slightly, sat down, and placed her hands on her lap. The applause continued for a moment longer, then faded into silence. Absolute silence. 2,800 people holding their breath. In the front row, Harrison Caldwell sat with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Next to him, the other 4 judges watched intently. In the 10th row, Grace sat with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. 3 rows behind her, Professor Reynolds had his eyes closed, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. Amara took 3 deep breaths. In, out. In, out. In, out. She raised her hands and placed them on the keys, and she began to play. The competition had started at 4 o'clock sharp. Jennifer Park performed first. She played a medley of pieces, Chopin's Ballade, No. 4, a Debussy prelude, and a contemporary piece by Kaija Saariaho. Her performance was technically flawless, her fingers flying across the keys with precision and speed. She received strong applause. Harrison's face remained impassive, but he nodded once, a small gesture that indicated approval. Christopher Liu followed. He chose Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, just the first movement, but arguably the most difficult 30 minutes in all of piano literature. He played it with power and passion, his entire body engaged in the effort. The audience gave him a standing ovation. Harrison actually smiled, a rare sight. Sofia Martinez performed third. She chose a program of Spanish composers Albeniz Granados and De Falla. Her playing was colorful and vibrant, full of life and emotion. She charmed the audience, and by the end, people were cheering. Harrison applauded politely, but didn't stand. Then came David Kim. He played Prokofiev's 7th Piano Sonata, all 3 movements, 25 minutes of modern, percussive, technically demanding music. His performance was perfect, literally perfect. Not a single wrong note, not a single rhythmic hiccup, not a single dynamic out of place. It was like listening to a computer, a very expensive, very sophisticated computer. The applause was respectful, but cool. Harrison's expression suggested he was impressed by the technique, but unmoved by the artistry. During the 15-minute break before Amara's performance, the audience buzzed with conversation. Who would win? Christopher seemed to be the favorite. His performance had been the most emotionally engaging. But Jennifer's technique was superior. David's perfection was undeniable. Sophia had the audience's hearts. And then there was the 5th performer, the blind girl, the one Harrison had humiliated 6 months ago, the one who had the audacity to perform his own composition back to him. The gossip spread through the hall. People pulled out their phones, showed their neighbors the video from the Met Gala. "This is going to be interesting," someone whispered. "This is going to be a disaster," someone else replied. In the judging area, Harrison leaned over to his fellow judge, a renowned conductor named Margaret Thornton. "This is inappropriate," he said quietly. "She shouldn't be here. This is a serious competition, not a platform for social statements." Margaret gave him a sharp look. "She earned her place here, Harrison. She won the semifinals fair and square. Let her perform before you judge." "I've already heard her play," Harrison said coldly. "Competent mimicry, nothing more." "Then her performance tonight won't threaten you," Margaret replied. "Will it?" Harrison said nothing, but his jaw tightened. At 8 o'clock, as Amara walked onto the stage, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This was the confrontation. This was the moment of truth. Amara walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage, and time seemed to slow down. Every step was deliberate. Every movement was purposeful. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She walked like someone who had every right to be there because she did. The purple dress flowed around her as she moved, catching the light. Her head was held high, her shoulders back. She couldn't see the audience, but she could feel them, feel their anticipation, their curiosity, their doubt. In the front row, Harrison Caldwell uncrossed his arms and leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed. There was something different about this girl from the last time he'd seen her. At the Met Gala, she had seemed defeated, crushed by his words. Now she seemed transformed. There was a confidence in her bearing that hadn't been there before. It was almost unsettling. Amara reached the piano. She stood beside it for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the polished surface. She appeared to be looking out at the audience, though her eyes saw nothing. To the audience, it seemed like she was taking them in, acknowledging them, preparing herself. In reality, she was listening. Listening to the subtle sounds of the hall, the air circulation, the creaks of seats, the breathing of thousands of people. She was mapping the space in her mind, understanding where the sound would go, how it would reflect, how it would be received. Then she sat. The bench was positioned perfectly. The stage crew had set it based on her specifications from the practice session. She adjusted it slightly, moving it forward an inch. Her hands rested on her lap. She was perfectly still. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Someone in the balcony coughed nervously. Someone else shifted in their seat. The tension was building, becoming almost unbearable. Harrison glanced at his watch. Was she waiting for something? Was this a dramatic pause, or was she frozen with fear? 20 seconds. Then Amara spoke. Her voice was clear, strong, amplified by the excellent acoustics of the hall. Before I begin, she said, I want to say something. 6 months ago, someone in a room very much like this one told me that my blindness made me incapable of real artistry, that I could only mimic, never create, that my presence on stage was charity, not art. The audience stirred. Everyone knew what she was talking about. Everyone knew who she was talking about. Harrison's face remained impassive, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. I've thought about those words every day since then. Amara continued. I've practiced every day thinking about those words, and I've come to a conclusion. He was wrong. Not because blindness doesn't limit me, it does in many ways, but it also gives me something. It gives me a different way of hearing, a different way of feeling, a different way of understanding what music is and what it can be. She turned her head toward where she knew the judges sat. She couldn't see Harrison, but she faced him anyway. Tonight I'm going to perform your composition, Mr. Caldwell. Rhapsody in Darkness. You wrote this piece about darkness, about what it feels like to be lost, to be surrounded by absence, to search for light. But you wrote it from the outside, as an observer, as someone who was visiting darkness temporarily. I live in darkness. Every day. Every moment. I don't visit it. It's my home. And tonight, I'm going to show you what your piece really sounds like when it's played by someone who knows darkness intimately. Not as a concept, not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality. The audience was completely silent. Harrison had gone very still, his face a mask. You wrote 7 movements, Amara said. But with your permission, I've added something to the final movement, because your ending suggested that emergence from darkness was final, complete, triumphant. But that's not how darkness works. It doesn't just end. It ebbs and flows. It comes and goes. And the real triumph isn't escaping it. It's learning to live with it, to create beauty alongside it, to let it be part of who you are, rather than something you have to overcome. She paused, then added, I hope you'll forgive me for the liberty I've taken with your composition, but I think perhaps you wrote it so that someone like me could complete it. Then she placed her hands on the keys. The hall held its breath, and Amara began to play. The first notes of Rhapsody in Darkness fell into the silence of Carnegie Hall like drops of water into a still pond. Simple, pure, each one distinct and clear. Movement 1, Twilight. Amara played it with a delicate touch that Harrison had never imagined when he composed it. Where he had written it as an academic exercise in diminishing light, she played it as a memory. A child's memory of the last time she saw her mother's face, the last time she saw color, the last time light meant anything more than warmth on her skin. The melody was deceptively simple, a repeating figure in the right hand, while the left hand provided gentle harmonic support. But Amara found depths in that simplicity that Harrison had never intended. Each repetition of the melody was slightly different, slightly more distant, slightly more faded. It was the sound of something slipping away, of holding on to something precious, even as it vanishes. In the audience, people leaned forward in their seats. There was something different about this interpretation, something personal, something real. Harrison sat very still, his arms crossed again, but his eyes were fixed on Amara's hands. She played without looking at them, obviously couldn't look at them, but her fingers moved with absolute certainty. There was no hesitation, no searching for the keys. They knew where to go. The dynamics shifted. The music grew quieter, more intimate. Amara was playing so softly now that the audience had to strain to hear. It forced them to engage, to participate, to lean into the music, rather than letting it wash over them. In the third row, Grace had tears streaming down her face. She recognized what Amara was playing. This was the night Amara lost her sight. This was the moment when the world went dark for the last time. The movement was only 5 minutes long, but it felt timeless. When it ended, the final note fading into silence, the audience was so captivated that no one even thought to applaud between movements. Amara's hands remained on the keys for 3 seconds. Then she began movement 2. Movement 2, descent. The tempo increased dramatically. What had been gentle and contemplative became urgent and frightening. Amara's hands flew across the keys, creating cascades of notes that tumbled over each other, like water rushing down a cliff. This was the descent into true darkness. Not the gentle fading of twilight, but the plunge into absence, the loss, the fear, the panic of a 9-year-old girl realizing that the dark wasn't temporary, that it wasn't going away, that this was forever. The music was violent in places. Amara struck the keys with force, creating dissonances that made people wince. But it wasn't random violence. It was controlled, purposeful. It was the sound of a child screaming in darkness, of hands reaching for something, anything, and finding nothing. Harrison's expression had changed. The impassivity was cracking. His brow was furrowed, his lips slightly parted. This wasn't how he had written this movement. Or rather, this was what he had written, but he had never heard it played like this. He had never felt it like this. Amara's body moved with the music swaying, rocking her face, reflecting the turmoil of the piece. She wasn't performing for the audience. She was reliving something. The music wasn't coming from the piano. It was coming from her, through her, the piano, just the instrument that made it audible. The movement ended with a harsh cluster of notes, discordant and unresolved. Then silence, then movement 3, the void. This was the longest movement, nearly 15 minutes. It was also the slowest. The tempo marking was largo, very slow, and Amara respected that. She played each note with weight, with gravity, with the feeling of being pressed down by the darkness itself. The silence between notes became part of the music. 3-second gaps where nothing happened, where the hall held its breath, where the absence of sound was as important as the sound itself. This was depression. This was despair. This was the place where hope goes to die. Amara knew this place. She had lived there for months after losing her sight. The place where you wonder if anything will ever be okay again, if life has any meaning, if you should even keep trying. The melody, such as it was, moved in slow, descending chromatic lines. Down, 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 each note heavier than the last. The harmonies were sparse, leaving huge empty spaces in the sonic landscape. In the audience, people were crying. Not just Grace now, but dozens of people. The music was too honest, too raw. It demanded emotional engagement. It wouldn't let you sit back and observe. It made you feel. Harrison's hands, which had been gripping the armrests of his seat, slowly relaxed. He was listening now. Really listening. Not as a judge, not as a critic, but as a human being, being spoken to by another human being in the only language that transcends words. 14 minutes into movement 3, Amara reached the lowest point. A single bass note played fortissimo that resonated through the hall like a death knell. She held it, let it ring, let it fill the space. Then silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. then barely audible a single high note, played so softly it was almost imaginary. A question, a tiny spark in the darkness, and Movement 4 began. Movement 4, Crisis. This was the technical peak of the piece, the section that Amara had struggled with for weeks. The section that had broken other pianists, the section that Harrison himself found challenging. The music was fast, complex, demanding absolute precision while maintaining emotional intensity. Polyrhythmic sections where each hand played in different time signatures. Passages where the hands crossed repeatedly at high speed. Octave runs spanning the entire keyboard. Amara played it with controlled chaos. Her fingers were a blur. Her hands crossed and recrossed, moving so fast they almost seemed to teleport from one position to another. And yet every note was clear, every rhythm precise, every dynamic exact. But more than the technical prowess, more than the sheer speed and complexity was the emotion underneath. This wasn't showing off. This was barely holding on. This was the sound of someone in crisis, someone fighting to keep going, someone on the edge of collapse, but refusing to fall. The audience watched in stunned silence. This wasn't humanly possible. This level of difficulty combined with this level of expressiveness while being unable to see the keys, it defied belief. Harrison's mouth had fallen open slightly. He was leaning forward in his seat now, all pretense of detachment gone. He had written this section to be barely playable. He had intended it to be a kind of technical gauntlet, a way to separate the merely excellent from the truly exceptional. And this blind girl from Brooklyn was playing it better than he ever had, better than he had thought possible. The crisis built to a climax, a furious cascade of notes that seemed to have no end, that seemed to be spiraling out of control. And then at the moment when it seemed like everything would collapse, the music suddenly stopped. Complete silence. One beat, two beats, then a single note, soft, tentative. A question. Movement 5. Searching. This was the turning point. The moment when even in complete darkness something begins to look for light. The melody was fragile, uncertain, like someone taking their first steps after a terrible injury. Amara played it with heartbreaking vulnerability. The notes trembled. The rhythm hesitated. The harmonies were unresolved questioning. This was hope that had been hurt, that was scared to hope again, but was trying anyway. The melody wandered, seeming to lose its way, then finding a direction, then losing it again. It was the sound of searching in darkness, of reaching out with no guarantee that you'll find anything but reaching out anyway. In the 10th row, Grace was sobbing openly. She recognized this too. This was Amara at 15, after years of struggling, finally finding the piano again, finally finding her voice again. The searching continued, the melody growing slightly stronger, slightly more confident. Fragments of earlier themes began to reappear, transformed, hopeful. The darkness was still there, but within it, light was being born. Movement 5 ended not with a resolution, but with a suspension. A chord left hanging in the air, unresolved, waiting. Movement 6, Emergence. The suspended chord from Movement 5 resolved, and suddenly the music was brighter, warmer, more alive. This was the moment of breakthrough. This was hope solidifying into something real. The tempo increased, but not frantically, like in Movement 4. This was energized, purposeful. The melodies from earlier movements returned, but transformed. Where they had been dark and desperate now, they were bright and triumphant. Where they had been questions, now they were answers. Amara's entire body was engaged now. She swayed with the music, her head tilted back, her face radiant. Her fingers danced across the keys. There was no other word for it. They danced. The music grew in power and complexity. Layers of melody stacked on top of each other, creating a rich tapestry of sound. The harmonies became richer, more colorful. The rhythms became more driving, more insistent. This was victory. This was overcoming. This was refusing to be broken. This was transformation. The audience was completely transported. Every person in that hall was feeling it, living it, experiencing Amara's journey as if it were their own. The power of the music was undeniable, overwhelming. Harrison's face was wet with tears. He didn't notice. He was too absorbed in the music, too caught up in what was happening. This was his composition, but it wasn't his composition. Amara had taken it somewhere he had never imagined, had found depths in it he hadn't known were there. Movement 6 built to a powerful climax, a triumphant statement in full chords that rang through the hall like bells. The sound was glorious, affirming, joyful. And then, at the moment of greatest triumph, the music suddenly darkened. This was Amara's addition. The part she had changed. The part Harrison hadn't written. The triumphant melody faltered. The bright harmonies dimmed. The rhythm stumbled. For a moment it seemed like everything would collapse back into the void. The audience tensed. What was happening? Why was the triumph being undercut? But then instead of fighting the darkness, instead of trying to banish it, the music did something unexpected. It embraced it. Movement 7. Luminescence. But not the luminescence Harrison had written. This was luminescence reimagined. Luminescence completed. Amara played the bright, triumphant theme that Harrison had written. But alongside it, she wove in the dark, descending theme from Movement 3. Light and darkness playing together. Not fighting. Not one overcoming the other. Coexisting. The music was complex now in a different way. Not technically, though, it was still demanding, but conceptually. It was saying something profound. It was saying that emergence from darkness isn't about leaving the darkness behind. It's about learning to carry it with you, to let it be part of who you are, to find beauty, not despite it, but alongside it. The two themes danced together, harmonized, became two parts of the same whole. Sometimes the bright theme led, sometimes the dark theme led. But they were always together, always in conversation, always completing each other. In the front row, Margaret Thornton, the conductor and fellow judge, understood immediately. Her eyes widened. This was brilliant. This was revolutionary. This was taking Harrison's composition and showing him what it was really about, what he had been reaching for but hadn't quite grasped. Harrison understood too. He sat frozen in his seat, tears streaming down his face, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles were white. This was his piece. But it wasn't his piece. This was what he had been trying to say all along, and he hadn't even known it. The music built to its final climax. Both themes merged completely, became one. Light and darkness, joy and sorrow, hope and fear, all existing together in perfect harmony. The sound filled Carnegie Hall, resonated in the walls, in the air, in the hearts of every person present. Amara played the final progression. The hands came together for the last chord. A bright C major chord, but with a subtle minor seventh, added a touch of complexity, a reminder that life is never purely simple. never purely happy or purely sad. She played the chord forte, let it ring, held the sustain pedal down. The sound filled the hall, magnificent and full and complete. Then she lifted her hands from the keys. The sound continued for a moment, slowly fading, the overtones dying away one by one. Silence. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 7 seconds. Amara sat perfectly still, her hands in her lap, her head slightly bowed. 10 seconds of complete silence. Then Carnegie Hall erupted. The applause started like thunder. Sudden, overwhelming, absolute. 2,800 people rose to their feet as one. The sound of their applause was deafening, shaking the walls of Carnegie Hall, reverberating through the historic space like an earthquake. People were screaming, crying, throwing programs in the air. The standing ovation wasn't polite. It wasn't measured. It was ecstatic. It was the kind of ovation that happens maybe once in a decade when an audience witnesses something truly transcendent. Amara stood her legs, shaking her heart, pounding. She couldn't see the audience, but she could feel them. Feel their energy, their emotion, their validation. She took a bow, and the applause grew even louder. In the 10th row, Grace was sobbing and laughing, at the same time her hands pressed to her mouth. Professor Reynolds beside her was on his feet, applauding so hard his hands hurt tears streaming down his weathered face. In the balconies, people were leaning over the railings, applauding, cheering. In the boxes, wealthy patrons who normally maintained decorum were on their feet, visibly moved. The other 4 finalists watching from backstage stood in stunned silence. Jennifer Park's eyes were wide. Christopher Liu shook his head in disbelief. Sophia Martinez whispered, "My God, my God." David Kim simply stood there, knowing with absolute certainty that he had not won this competition. The applause continued. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Amara bowed again, her smile, radiant tears streaming down her face. And in the front row, Harrison Caldwell stood slowly. His face was wet with tears. His hands came together and he began to applaud. Not politely, not with reservation, but genuinely forcefully, with the full recognition of what he had just witnessed. Margaret Thornton looked at him surprised. Harrison met her eyes and nodded. He had been wrong. Completely, utterly, profoundly wrong. The other judges were already on their feet, applauding enthusiastically. But seeing Harrison stand, seeing him applaud, seeing the emotion on his face that meant something, that meant everything. 4 minutes of applause. 5 minutes. The stage manager, Patricia, was crying in the wings. The ushers who had seen thousands of performances in this hall stood amazed. This was special. This was historic. Finally, the applause began to fade. Amara bowed one more time, then began to walk off stage. But before she could reach the wings, a voice called out, "Miss Williams!" It was Harrison. He had walked to the side of the stage, was climbing the steps. The audience went silent, watching. What was he doing? Harrison walked across the stage to where Amara stood. She heard his footsteps turned toward the sound. They stood facing each other, the man who had humiliated her, and the woman who had just proved him wrong. Miss Williams Harrison said, his voice carrying in the silent hall. "May I speak with you?" "Of course, Mr. Caldwell," Amara replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Harrison took a deep breath. Then he said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear, "I owe you an apology. A profound, complete, absolute apology. 6 months ago, I said things about you that were cruel, ignorant, and wrong. I said that your blindness made you incapable of true artistry. I said that your presence on stage was charity, not art. I was wrong. I was completely, utterly wrong. The audience was completely silent. Every eye was on Harrison and Amara. You didn't just perform my composition tonight, Harrison continued, his voice breaking. You showed me what I was too blind to see when I wrote it. You took my notes and found depths in them that I didn't know were there. You understood my piece better than I understood it myself. And the changes you made, the additions to the final movement, they completed it. They made it whole. They made it true. He paused, struggling to find words. I've spent my entire life believing that artistry required perfect conditions, perfect training, perfect instruments, perfect faculties. But you've shown me that true artistry transcends all of that. True artistry is about truth. It's about expressing something that can't be expressed any other way. And what you did tonight was true artistry, the truest I've ever witnessed. Harrison's voice dropped, became more personal, though still audible throughout the hall. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry for being so arrogant and so limited in my understanding. You are a master, Miss Williams. You are what I have always aspired to be, but never quite achieved. You are a true artist. Then Harrison did something that shocked everyone in the hall. He extended his hand to Amara. Would you forgive me? He asked quietly. Amara stood still for a long moment. The hall held its breath. Then she reached out, found his hand, and shook it firmly. Yes, Mr. Caldwell, she said. I forgive you. The audience erupted again. Applause, cheers, whistles. People were openly weeping. This wasn't just a competition anymore. This was something transcendent. This was redemption. This was growth. This was humanity at its best. Harrison stepped back, still applauding, and gestured for Amara to take another bow. She did, and the ovation continued. When she finally left the stage, Grace and Professor Reynolds were waiting in the wings. They wrapped her in their arms, the three of them crying and laughing together. You did it, baby Grace whispered. You did it. No, Mama, Amara said. We did it. All of us. The judges' deliberation took less than 15 minutes. The vote was unanimous. Amara Williams was the winner of the Carnegie Hall Young Artists Competition. The video of her performance went viral within hours. By the next morning, it had 50 million views. By the end of the week, it had been shared by every major news outlet in the world. The clip of Harrison's apology and their handshake became iconic, a symbol of growth and redemption. But that was just the beginning. 6 months later, Amara stood backstage at the Hollywood Bowl, preparing for a solo concert in front of an audience of 18,000 people. She was wearing a deep red dress now, her natural hair styled in elegant locks. She looked older, more confident, more at peace. The offers had come flooding in after Carnegie Hall. Juilliard offered her a full scholarship personally delivered by the dean. Berkeley sent a letter of apology and an offer of admission with full funding. Record labels competed for her signature. She ultimately signed with Deutsche Grammophon, the same label Harrison was on. Her first album, recorded 3 months after the competition, was titled Luminescence. It featured her performance of Rhapsody in Darkness, along with her own compositions. It debuted at #1 on the classical charts and won 2 Grammys. But more important than the professional success was what happened to Amara herself. She had found her voice, her purpose, her place in the world. She wasn't the blind pianist anymore. She wasn't the inspirational story. She was Amara Williams' artist. Harrison Caldwell had become one of her most vocal advocates. He publicly wrote about his experience, about what he had learned, about how Amara had changed his understanding of music and art. He had also become, surprisingly, a mentor to her. They met once a month, shared meals, discussed music, debated interpretations. An unlikely friendship had formed. He had also changed how he taught and judged. He no longer looked for perfection. He looked for truth. He advocated for accessibility in music education. He funded scholarships for disabled musicians. He had become, in his own way, a better person. But tonight wasn't about Harrison. Tonight was about Amara. Grace was in the audience front row center, holding the hand of Professor Reynolds. Both of them were beaming with pride. Also in the audience were the other finalists from Carnegie Hall: Jennifer, Christopher, Sophia, and David. All of them had become friends with Amara, had found success in their own right. But all of them acknowledged that that night at Carnegie Hall, they had witnessed something special. The lights dimmed. The audience of 18,000 fell silent. The MC's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amara Williams." Amara walked onto the stage of the Hollywood Bowl, and the applause was immediate and thunderous. She smiled, waved, found her way to the piano. She sat down, adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys. The audience fell silent. Before playing, Amara spoke into the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 6 months ago, I stood on a different stage, and I played a piece of music that changed my life. Tonight, I'm going to play something I wrote. It's called In Darkness Light. Because I've learned something important. My blindness didn't limit me. It gave me a different way of seeing, a different way of hearing, a different way of understanding what music is and what it can be." She paused, then added, "I used to think that being blind was my weakness, but it's not. It's my superpower. Because I hear things that sighted people can't hear. I feel things that sighted people can't feel. And I make music that can only come from someone who lives in darkness every day, who knows darkness intimately, who has learned not to fight it, but to dance with it." She placed her hands on the keys. "This is for everyone who has ever been told they weren't good enough. For everyone who has ever been limited by someone else's understanding of what's possible. For everyone who has ever had to prove themselves against expectations they didn't set. You are enough. You are more than enough. You are extraordinary." And then Amara Williams began to play. The music that poured from the piano was unlike anything the audience had heard before. It was complex and simple, dark and bright, sorrowful and joyful all at once. It was the sound of a life lived fully of obstacles, overcome of limitations, transformed into strengths. It was the sound of someone who had been told she couldn't, proving that she could. It was the sound of triumph. 18,000 people sat in the California night under the stars, listening to a blind pianist from Brooklyn make music that transcended sight, that transcended sound, that transcended everything except the human need to express, to create, to be heard. And in that moment, Amara wasn't playing for them. She was playing for herself. For the 9-year-old girl who had lost her sight and thought her life was over. For the teenager who had taught herself piano on a broken keyboard. For the young woman who had been humiliated and had chosen to rise instead of fall. She was playing for everyone who had ever been underestimated. Everyone who had ever been counted out. Everyone who had ever been told no. and the music said loudly and clearly, "Yes. Yes, you can. Yes, you are worthy. Yes, you matter." The piece ended with a single sustained note that seemed to hang in the air forever, holding the promise of everything that was and everything that could be. Then silence. Then applause that seemed to shake the very stars. Amara Williams stood, took a bow, and smiled. She had found her light, not despite the darkness, but within it.